Hello and welcome to Archive West Texas. I'm your host, Gordon Wilkerson, joined as always by our producer, Rachel Boyd. On this program, we visit with people who shape the history, culture, and spirit of our region. We talk about their journeys, their influences, and the experiences that help make them who they are today. Our goal is not only to preserve these stories, but to find inspiration in lives well lived. Our guest today is Charlotte Northington, a lifelong Lubbock resident, longtime educator, and someone who has met both the joys and challenges of life with grace, optimism, and quiet strength. Charlotte, welcome to Archive West Texas.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
You were born in Lubbock in the mid-30s.
That's correct. I was born to Homer and Willie Lee Branham, and I was their only child until I was a senior in high school.
Really?
So I was reared really as an only child, and then my brother came along, and he was really reared as an only child. So I know about that type of lifestyle because I kind of felt sorry for him because you miss all the brothers and sisters, I think. You have some, you know what they mean to your life.
They do. They're a very meaningful part of life. So what did your parents do?
My daddy moved here. His family did because my grandfather had asthma very bad, and they moved from Paris, Texas. And when he got out here, he got in the meat business, and he worked for other people as a butcher. And then he and my uncle, they started City Packing Company, also known as Cafe and Branham Packing Company, and they had that for about 22 years. And my mother was a homemaker, and she let this only child rule her life. She made back then, she made my clothes. She took care of me, and she and I had a close relationship because of that.
Now, where was your home?
My home, it was in Lubbock.
No, what was it? Where was your house in Lubbock?
Where's my house? It was in East Lubbock, and I went to George M. Hunt. Now the post office is there, and my grandparents, mother's family, as well as my daddy's family, they lived close by. We were a very close-knit family. My mother was from a family of 10, so I had a lot of cousins, 29, matter of fact. And my daddy was from a family of 3. He was the only son. He had 2 sisters. And so I was very close to that daddy's family. And his mother was, her name was Mary, and I call her Mary of the Bible because she definitely was. She was a wonderful Bible teacher to all of us. She lived the life, not only taught it, but she lived it. And she took care of my grandfather, who was an invalid. He couldn't work. And so I went to George M. Hunt Elementary School. It now is a car lot, which used to be for Aldersons, Cavenders now. They tore that down, but that was very close friends. I still have 2 friends living that were my George M. Hunt friends. And they are guys. One of them is a retired minister, and he had moved away, but he still has stayed close. The other one came to Lubbock when I was in the 2nd grade, and he has been my treasured friend all these years. He lives in the Dallas area, but we stay in touch with both guys.
There you go.
And my husband played football with both of them, and they won state for Lubbock. And so they were his friends too.
What was it like to be a child in Lubbock in the 30s? What do you remember about the community? What did you enjoy doing?
I know the sandstorms really well because so many of the streets were not paved. And so when we had wind, we had sand like everything. My mother couldn't stand it, so she was just always cleaning house because it was my daddy being in the meat business. In the fall, we had the people would come to town to pull bowls or pick the cotton, whichever they were doing at that time. And we went out to eat on Saturday night, and sometimes we went to see a movie. Sometimes we came home and listened to Grand Ole Opry. Roy Acuff was my daddy's favorite, so we gathered around the radio and listened to Eddie Arnold and the rest of the group. Oh, and the lady that wore the hat, Mina Pearl, we had that. And within Daddy's meat business situation, Harmel Meats came to Lubbock, and Daddy got the rights to that. And then they brought Eddie Arnold to Lubbock for a show for all of us. And that was at Lubbock High. That was the only auditorium we really had back then, and that would seat that many. And that was one of Daddy's favorites. He really did enjoy that part of it. As far as walk to school, our mother drove me to school. And then I would come home of an afternoon, and Mother and I might run errands or things. I didn't have a whole bunch of neighborhood kids around. But the thing about it was I had some good teachers.
Who were some of your favorite teachers? And
My very favorite teachers was Laddie Rakin. And after in high school, I found out her name was really Charlotte, and she went by Laddie. And she had red hair. I had her in the 4th grade, and she and I were friends forever. My 6th grade teacher was a man. They brought him in, and he taught us all our subjects. And I have to tell this one story. When I got to go to junior high, we had history teachers, math teachers, and all that. And in the math class one day, I just could not understand the principle that he was telling us about in math. And I said, I can't get that. He said, Charlotte, you ought to. I said, who was your 6th grade teacher? You should have learned it then. And I got in trouble. I said, you were my 6th grade teacher. I got back at him. And so he was not a lifelong friend. But then in high school, Paul Bowie was my business teacher, my homeroom teacher, and his family was alive. His son was my ring bearer when I got married. And my mother and daddy thought a lot of the Bowie family, so we were close with them. So we had some good teachers back then. I will say this, when I got to college, I really found out how good of teachers I had. From a lot of little surrounding schools, everybody had been like the editor of the school paper or the yearbook. And boy, when I read their papers and how they described things, how they spelled, then I knew Lubbock really was very high on in college. I found out what a good education I had gotten. I did go to Texas Tech. I got my bachelor's at Tech and did graduate work at Tech. My sons, one was a Red Raider and one's a Baylor Bear. And so I know that they both got good. Since I was one of their teachers, I know they got we did have good teachers at Coronado before they went to high school.
Had some really good teachers at Coronado, and still do.
Oh, well, the speech teachers and people like that were always winning honors for our city. And it was great. Now, we just had the one high school when I was in school, and that was Lubbock High. And then we had one junior high, and while I was the 8th grade, we went to school half a day because they had to build more junior highs. Lubbock was growing so. And we think it's growing today. It was really growing back then because we went for a year and a half. I went half a day to junior high.
What did you do your graduate work in?
I went back and got certification in teaching, and my bachelor's was in secretarial administration. Well, Lubbock is really not a place for a really high executive secretary at that time. If you could type and take shorthand, that's all they wanted you to do. And so I went back, and one day my husband came home and he said, I've gotten a raise and I want you to take it and go back to school and get teacher certification, because if something happens to me, I would like to know that you would be off in the summertime with the boys. And so I went back then and got teacher certification. And then I ended up teaching at Coronado for 24 years. I was very lucky. I had all my LISD years at Coronado. And I became involved in continuing education at Texas Tech, wrote courses. If you authored a course, then you had the privilege of grading the paper and teaching it through continuing ed. And I did that for 20 years. And so my tech people, some of them were cruising around the world on their family's yachts, and they would mail me their lessons when they'd go into port. And then they became so busy that Tech then started, we had the courses by computers, and I didn't get to see them or know them that well, but it was interesting.
So you referenced that back in the day there was one high school in Lubbock. It was Lubbock High School. Tell us how you met your husband. Let's talk a little bit about Lubbock High football and state championships and those sorts of things.
Well, I'm not telling anything my son doesn't know, but we had homeroom parties back then. And one of my friends that was in my homeroom, he brought this friend along to my house. The party was at my house. And Mr. Huey, that I referenced to earlier, he was the one that was in charge. And this guy came and he wanted to know about my paper I had done for the next day. And he wanted to borrow it. And he ended up being my husband. And so I don't know if it was the education part or if it was my red hair or what. Now, it wasn't the red hair because he said he would never date anyone that had red hair. And he ended up marrying one. And both his sons were redheaded. But he and I, we were, at that time, we were in our junior year at Lubbock High. And then in the fall, they went to state. They won state in football, and they played it in the Cotton Bowl, which was an exciting thing for them. And so he was offered several scholarships, and I thought he was going to take the one I would have chosen, which was to Baylor, but he chose the one to Texas Tech. And then I was going through Rush at Texas Tech, and you weren't supposed to talk to anyone. And he told my mother, he said, I've got to talk to her because I'm not going to play football in college. It's not like it was in high school. So he didn't play in college, but he stayed and went to Texas Tech. So I stayed here and went to Tech too. And we got married between our sophomore and junior year. And then once we graduated, he had to go into the military. And he played football for 2 years for the Navy. And at that time, I had to leave Lubbock. And that made me know I wanted to come back to Lubbock.
So he played football in Annapolis? Or
No, back then it was commanders of the bases. They had teams and they played each other. And he played for Bainbridge in Bainbridge, Maryland for 1 year. And then they wanted him down at Little Creek in Virginia, which was down by Virginia Beach. And so we lived 2 blocks from Virginia Beach. And while he was playing ball, I was a secretary at a bank, at the Bank of Virginia. And that definitely made me want to come back and become a teacher because I realized that's what I want to do. So the thing about it is that my friend George M. Hunt gave my husband a ride one night after football practice, and it happened to be to my house. And my friend said, well, Charlotte Brown lives here. And he said, yeah, I know it. And come to find out, they became the best of friends, were and still to this day. Every time he sees Charlton, he says, it's just like seeing your dad. And it's a lifelong friend for me. That's the one thing about it. I love about people. We like each other.
We do. It's a friendly community.
And you know, people come to college here. They really don't want to come to a little podunk town. And before you know it, they're living here and raising their family. It's a wonderful place to rear a family.
Who were some of your best teachers at Lubbock High and Tech?
At Coronado, I grew up learning a lot about teachers when I went to Coronado because that was my first teaching position. And I'd always thought teachers were on a pedestal. When I got to high school teaching, I found out they're human. That they didn't live the perfect life I thought a teacher did because the ladies didn't have their hair in a knot in the back, wear very simple dresses. Glenda Rawls and I taught next to each other. She had come, her daddy's, the business, family business, was hauling cattle. They had hauled cattle for my daddy or his meat packing company. And so she had come to my wedding, and we ended up being friends until God took her home a year or so ago. And we were right next door to each other at that time. Other people, Patty Jones was good. Frank Anderson, who was in woodworking, things like that. He loved the students. He honored them. He still loves students. And he was one of my favorite people at Coronado. Elsie Andress was a sophomore counselor. She is the one that told the principal I needed to come to Coronado and be a Mustang. And I appreciated that of her. I had different principals through the years. Her son was one of my principals, Mick Andrews. I had Ronnie Gooch is the one who hired me. And then he went to central office. So I floated for a good 2 or 3 years. I would teach in a room. And then when that period was over, I had to go down to another part of the building in that area. So I got into foreign language and had a friend there. And then Glenda Ross was in business education with me. And we had May Feed. That was when Dunbar teachers had to cross over and come in to this part of Lubbock. And then our part of Coronado teachers had to go into other parts of Lubbock to teach. So May was next door, and she was a lot of fun. She brought some humor to what we did. And she and my younger son became good friends. And when the weather was cold, she'd give Chad the keys to her car to go warm it up before she left school. So she really trusted that child. And so I was head of the business education department after 3 or 4 years. And then I also was the UIL person for Coronado, and then also for accounting and typing, and took a typing student to state. And that was a lot of pressure for me. But I didn't want him not to have what he needed when we got to Austin. And I hadn't been in Coronado too long, and they called me in and they said, we're going to go to electric typewriters. We had the old manual ones, and said, we want you to help select what we get. So I did, and the other schools got them afterwards, and they liked what we had. And I had the opportunity to buy one for my own personal use. So I bought one so I could take it along for if the typer, there's a difference. I don't know if you realize it or not, but there is a difference in the touch. And so I took that on. When I got Pong set up at State, the young man that was next to him, boy, he was typing fast. So when Pong came out after they had the exercise, I said, well, how'd you do? And he said, I didn't beat myself. He said, I did as good. And that's all you can do. You can do your best, what you've ever done. And that's what he did. So that part of my life, I worked with the teachers with UIL because I was over it at Coronado the last few years I was there, and got to know students on trips and things in different ways.
Yeah. Charlotte, what were some of the happiest seasons of your family life?
Well, when I was growing up, our vacation time was spent going back home. That was Daddy's comment. Going back home. That was going back to Honey Grove in Paris, Texas, where he grew up. And then he happened to be introduced to Pagosa Springs, Colorado. And that became our destination. We would go and stay 2 weeks each year. And so that was a lot of fun. And they'd let me take a friend or a cousin along for me to have someone my age to be with at that time. But my mother was from the large family, and we would get together when some of the family would come in that didn't get to come very often. Like they lived in California or they were in the military. And every time they came home, my mother and her sister that lived at Idlew, they made sandwiches by the tons and about 6 homemade freezers of ice cream. And it was so ironic. Last year, I had 4 of the girls within a month. They said, oh, I sure do miss rolling down the hills at Mackenzie Park, because that's where we would go to have our little retreats. And all of us, the girls, would do that. But when you have women as old as I am, missing rolling down the hills at Mackenzie Park. So that was fun time. But then when my sons came along, we changed from Pagosa Springs to Ouray, Colorado. But Mother and Daddy would still take them back to see Pagosa.
Well, Ouray is a beautiful place. I mean,
Isn't Ouray beautiful?
It is.
The first time we went to Ouray, we took a travel trailer. We rented one to see if we liked it before we bought one. And we stayed in Ouray, and they suggested we get a Jeep. And on the July the 4th, the Jeeps go up to Switchback, put flares on the front of the Jeeps, and drive down slowly down into Ouray. And we fell in love with Ouray then. Charlton and I would go today if we really could get past the snow and get there, I guess.
Yeah,
But it's a beautiful place.
it certainly is. When you look back over your years as an educator, what do you hope your students remember about you?
Well, first year I taught. Afterwards, my brother had graduated the year before that. And he came back to pick up some friends, especially a cute little girl or something like that. And I said, well, Randy, what are they talking about me? What are they saying? He said, oh, they say they call you Big Red. And so I hope I'm not remembered as Big Red. But when I see a former student, they will come up and say, I knew if that was you because of your red hair. And so I hope they remember that I'm a Christian, that they came in my class, they were treated fairly, and that they could see me out in public and know that I lived the life that I told them they ought to live. I also had student teachers that I hope I shaped their lives and told them about what they ought to do as a teacher. And it was fun.
When you think about Lubbock today, what it is today and where it's come from in your life, you don't like it?
It got too big.
Got too big.
Got too big. I used to could go over to Buntover, Texas, and I'd know 2 or 3 people in there. It was a lot of fun. I can go out now and I don't see people that I know, but I'm thankful for the people that do come into town. If I sit down to wait for a table, well, I might start up a conversation and I will find out that they're from a small town around and they've come into Lubbock to eat and shop and they leave their tax dollars here. I don't know the people that own the businesses like I once did. My daddy had the meat packing company, and you probably don't know this, but he would take custom orders or people would bring their animals that they'd killed, and we'd cut it, freezer wrap it, and we took it to Wilson cold storage and for people to put in their locker.
Put it in the locker.
That they had there. And then when my daddy closed up his plant, he still kept a locker there because he had some items brought in. But I didn't meet your dad there. I met your dad in Georgia High. No. He was a grade behind me, and I can see John just right now out there playing with my cousin because those 2 girls, they ran the neighborhood.
I don't know about that. Anyway.
Yeah, they had fun. Well, they behaved themselves and they had fun, but they were the ones behind us. They were not in front of us, and so we had to make the way, and they followed us.
There you go.
It was fun.
What's your best Buddy Holly story?
Oh, my goodness. I remember they were talking about this guy that sang, and his membership was over at a particular church on 34th. And I had a Buddy 2 years. And so I knew more about Buddy after he died than in school. And my friend, Mickey Andrews, was in this graduating class with Buddy. And the best thing I found out is I was on the alumni committee of Lubbock High, but since I've had some health problems, I've had to give that up. But I found out then, if you had a yearbook or annual, whatever you want to call it, it's worth a lot of money. If you got Buddy Holly's picture in there with you, just really, his music, True Love Ways, just sends me off into Never Neverland. I love it so much. And I loved hearing Donnie Allison sing it down the cactus. The cactus is the cactus to me. It's like it was when I was growing up. And that's fun. There's 2 or 3 places are just exactly like they were back then. And you can drive by them. And I'm so glad that the Hollands have gone in and fixed it up. The cactus. I enjoy going.
It's a community treasure, really.
It is. I very rarely ever go down there that I don't see someone I know. And some of the singers, they've been singing ever since I went back. I would go to the movie down there, and I told Dara this, and paid 5 cents. He charges a lot more now than what I pay. But the Saturday morning movies in Lubbock, the Lyric Theater and the Cactus, 5 cents. And my mother usually let me go. She'd get rid of it.
Something to do, yeah.
I needed, being an only child, it was hard. We didn't have TV. We had to go to the movie.
Yeah.
We had to go to the roller rink. Now, I never went to hear Buddy play. My husband and I, first date, we went to his homeroom's party, and then really a date to go out and do something. We went skating, and that became a part. But that was a big part of entertainment and what you did back then, is to go to the roller rink and So I guess that would be a good story to tell about. February comes around, and my daddy died on February the 3rd.
Really?
And Buddy's plane went down on the 3rd. So I had to grow up, Gordon, when my daddy died. I had 2 sons in college. I never had grown up. I always knew I was my daddy's little girl.
Yeah.
And I could go back to my daddy. And that morning when they called me at school, I knew then I had to grow up. And everybody loved my daddy. Charlton and Chad, they loved their granddad. They loved their grandmother, but there was just something special. And I have 2 cousins that they stayed with us a lot. And we're known as Homer's Angels. But we're not Charlie's Angels or Homer's Angels.
Yeah.
But for Buddy, to me, I love Mr. Davis too. And he writes some of my favorite songs. And so I don't know if I'm allowed to say their name over here and advertise for them, but the 2 of them.
You can talk about Mac Davis or Buddy Holly all you want to.
I love Mac Davis. He really wrote some good ones.
He did.
And I went out when they buried him, and some of my relatives and my friends said, "We saw you out at the cemetery. You were there." I said, "That's exactly where I wanted to be," because he was going to have his blue jeans on.
There you go.
And they said down at Sanders' funeral, he had his blue jeans on. He loved Lubbock, Texas. And I saw him one time when I was in Lake Tahoe, and I saw it. And he had put on a wonderful show. He really did. And I never saw Buddy in person, but I did see Mac Davis. But he disappointed me. He didn't sing Lubbock in
my rearview mirror.
I just knew he would, and he didn't. And I told Chuck, I said, "We just didn't yell loud enough, I guess, for an encore. I don't know." But he didn't disappoint me. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
He put on a good, clean show.
What makes you most proud of this community?
Well, it happened to my mother. She told me this. She had pulled up at a stoplight down by First Methodist Church, and this man honked his horn, wanted her to roll down her window. And she finally did. And he said, "What church is that?" He was by First Methodist. And she said, "It's First Methodist Church." And he said, "It's the prettiest thing." He said, "This town is wonderful." He said, "As long as you have the church steeples taller than the buildings, you're going to have a good town." And I think of that each time I see the steeple of First Methodist Church and I drive by it and the rose window, that it is I hope we're known to be not a church on every corner, but we have a lot of them, and I'm glad we do. That I hope that Lubbock is known for its good people, and for us to be good, we've got to have a good center in our lives and live it to the most. Just not talk it, but live it. And I think our Lubbock people do that.
Charlotte, thank you for taking time today to share your story with us. We appreciate your life as a teacher, a mother, and a member of this community. Your life reflects the quiet strength and steady optimism that have really shaped West Texas generations. And thank you for being very much a part of that.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed you as a student. I've enjoyed your family. And I'm telling you what, it's amazing. And that's the one thing about our Lubbock people. I think we move away, but we still want to come home.
Absolutely. I want to thank each of you for listening. Please join us again next week for another episode of Archive West Texas.